That may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Okay, my dudes, we got a ton of positive feedback when we went through and we talked about our worst team in Dynasty. I told you all the exact trades that I offered to try to turn that around and rebuild it. So we are going to be going through, we're going to be looking at my second worst team. I'm going to be breaking down what exactly went wrong. And honestly, I have no excuse for this roster. So the last team I went through and I went, okay, well, it was an auction draft. It was a live auction draft. We were live streaming. It was very difficult to manage everything and we messed up. This one, I have no excuse. I mean, this was a draft that was completely normal. Now, yes, we were live streaming it, of course, but I should be used to that by now. That should not be an excuse that I can use. So I have no excuse with this team. It's a bad roster. We're going to go in. We are going to try to fix it. And of course, guys, if you have any of your own comments, let me know down in the comment section with what you are thinking about this team, what you think I can do in terms of the moves I can make, and most importantly, what you think about the trade offers that I'm going to get to at the end of the video, if you think any of them are going to get accepted. But yeah, drop a like, subscribe to the channel, and let's dive into it. And let's start it off with the quarterback position because this is going to be a 12-team format, and it's going to be super flex, so obviously quarterback is going to be very important. And this is the one strength of the roster. So we have Russell Wilson here at our QB spot to lead us off at the very top. And then if we go down to our depth, I mean, we have both Trey Lance and Justin Fields. So y'all know Trey Lance, a quarterback that I am completely fine taking in the second round of Dynasty startup drafts that are super flex already, given the fact that he has the guaranteed job security over the next 4 years, given the fact that we saw his rushing production give him such a nice floor with what we can expect in terms of how many points he's going to be scoring, even if he is a very bad quarterback. We've seen Blake Bortles put up low-end quarterback one seasons. We've seen Mitchell Trubisky be usable in Superflex based on Trubisky's rushing upside, and that's the worst case scenario for Trey Lance. You go to best case scenario, he's Lamar Jackson with a stronger arm, and you are just drooling in an offense that has a great offensive line, that has George Kittle, that has Brandon Ayuk, that has Deebo Samuel. So you know I have to have my man Trey Lance on this team. We also have Justin Fields. Now, Justin Fields, that's going to be a player we are offering out in a ton of different trades at the end of the video. Please make sure you stick until that. And with Justin Fields, I understand that he has an elite ceiling. Now, I'm a little bit concerned about his production at Ohio State being led off with the fact that he possibly has the best two wide receivers in all of college football to throw the ball to. I mean, both Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave are disgusting, and you're going to see them in future NFL draft classes. Now, with Justin Fields, I will say the main difference between him and Trey Lance, we've covered this at length, is the fact that the 49ers are invested into Trey Lance to a point where historically they are giving him at the very minimum 4 years to start. Now, in the case of Justin Fields, you have not seen that same type of team investment in terms of quarterbacks that are going around pick 10 compared to inside the top 3. So given that, if Justin Fields does hit his downside in a situation that I would argue is pretty damn bad in Chicago, then all of a sudden that is an asset that can lose a lot of value very quickly. So I think Justin Fields, given our quarterback room, we are going to be looking to sell. Now, Jordan Love, we also have on this team. Obviously, Jordan Love, not necessarily a great piece now that Aaron Rodgers is back in Green Bay. And trust me, I have Jordan Love in so many Dynasty leagues. I was ready to get a live stream going if we had anything happen with Aaron Rodgers getting traded, if Aaron Rodgers was going to retire. And I was going to come out here and I was going to say, look at me, I'm a genius. We have Jordan Love everywhere. And now we're just kind of sitting here having him on our bench, him doing nothing and wasting away with that value. Now, that should be enough for the quarterback position. Clearly, this is the strong suit of the team. And I mean, in a 12-team Superflex league, it's pretty much not getting any better than this. Now, going over to running back, on the other hand. Now, this is a position where I think we definitely need a lot of work on. And I will say that kind of tongue-in-cheek because in this format, running back is not nearly as valuable as it will be in a standard fantasy football league. Because this is a PPR league where you only have to start one running back. You start 11 players total. You only have to start one quarterback, one running back, one wide receiver, a tight end, a super flex, and then 6 flex spots. And in a PPR format, I personally, and I'm planning on it this year, I like to start wide receivers in almost every single flex spot we can. So in a format like this, I'm comfortable only having one running back that we can rely on. He doesn't even have to be a Christian McCaffrey, Dalvin Cook type player. So I know this position looks really weak, but I want to put that disclaimer out here in understanding your league format and understanding how you attack a position because of so. So if you pull up our running back position right now, I mean, it's led off with Darrington Evans. I know that is disgusting, but beyond that, really the only notable name is going to be Travis Etienne. And there are a few guys like Giovanni Bernard that you could possibly look at, but I don't necessarily want to. And just a few depth pieces where maybe we got to start them a week or two if Travis Etienne is injured. Outside of that, we're planning on starting Travis Etienne in this spot every single week through the rest of the year. And a bad thing is with this running back room, we just have no value to make trades, and that's a big time problem. So now going over to our wide receiver position, you're going to see there are very few players that I'm actually trying to sell off this roster from the wide receiver spot because, I mean, all of these guys are very young. All of these guys should have some long-term value. I mean, we go up and DJ Moore, our wide receiver one, DJ Moore, a player with historic age-adjusted production. Love having him there. DJ Chark, Brian Edwards, Brandon Ayuk, Paris Campbell, Miles Boykin making out the rest of the starting lineup. I know we don't have our starting lineup set up optimally, but that's going to be fixed. The main names that you need to be checking out on this team are going to be DJ Chark, DJ Moore, Brandon Ayuk, Curtis Samuel, and down there on the bench, we have a lot of young rookies. We have Kadarius Toney, Elijah Moore. We also have Terrace Marshall and Dwayne Eskridge. So this wide receiver room is very young. It's not ready to produce right away. And this is what we talk about all the time in Dynasty. I do not want to be the guy that's kind of sitting halfway in the middle. I don't want to be halfway between producer and rebuilder. I want to make sure we're trying to make a play going to either one end of the spectrum. And I think we kind of go towards a rebuilding team, given the youth that we have at the wide receiver position here and the fact that we are definitely not going to be having enough points to contend this year. And just continuing to talk about how bad this team is, let's go over to the tight end position where we are going to have issues because we pull it up right now. Jonnu Smith is our tight end one in our starting lineup. And then down there on the bench, we have a bunch of no-name players, some guys that are probably going to get cut before we get to the year. We have Bryson Hopkins, Dalton Keene, Drew Sample, Jordan Atkins, Cole Kmet is the other notable name alongside Hunter Long. So at tight end, we really have nobody, but given the settings, not too concerned about not having a tight end of consequence here, even though it is 1.5 points per reception for the tight end position. At the same time, I think in a PPR format, you don't necessarily need to be planning on plugging and playing those tight ends in your flex spots, even with them getting half a point per reception. I mean, if you got to read our 2021 fantasy football draft guide, I actually dive in depth in terms of what difference you have between a tight end premium league and a regular league, and if you want to be drastically changing your tight end strategy. And honestly, I think that our plan in that transition is just going, well, you know what? We can raise the tight ends at the very top, but those guys that are going to be flex plays, really not any more intriguing than they should be without it. So now let's start pulling up some trades that we sent out. Our first one, we actually sent out to I Used to Be a Pats Fan. And here we offered him Justin Fields, trying to make a move over to a very similar quarterback in Zach Wilson, picking up Michael Gallup at the same time. So here with Wilson, I will acknowledge that he does not come close to Justin Fields and the type of fantasy upside that he can have based on the fact that with Zach Wilson, that's a quarterback that's very limited with his rushing capability. But what you do have is you have the long-term job security. And at the same time, this is an offense that is getting drastically better. They add Corey Davis. They add Elijah Moore. They restructure Jamison Crowder, have Denzel Mims going into year two. Most importantly, upgrade the offensive line. And I lied to you. That's not the most important thing. They get rid of Adam Gase. Zach Wilson, I actually have him pretty damn close to Justin Fields in our Dynasty rankings. I understand that a lot of people would prefer having Justin Fields and it isn't close. And that's why we're asking in return for a wide receiver that I really like in Michael Gallup, and that I think we can get away with making that switch and at the same time getting another guy for our flex spot, because I really want to go back to the fact that this is a start 11 dynasty league. A player like a Michael Gallup is going to have a significant amount of value because you need the depth throughout the season. That's a player that's going to be a free agent after this year. Possibly he re-signs with Dallas and Dallas Cowboys decide to move on from Amari Cooper. Possibly he finds himself a better landing spot. But regardless, love getting Michael Gallup as an add-on there. And now our next trade we actually sent out, we are offering Curtis Samuel and Jonnu Smith for Cam Akers. Now, this goes back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of just looking at it and trying to go to one end of the spectrum. Now, of course, if you're a contending team, you prefer having Curtis Samuel, Jonnu Smith if you really need the points this year. And keep in mind, those are pieces that are going to be hitting your starting lineup in a start 11 format. But given the fact that we are a rebuilding roster, I don't necessarily know what we can expect from Cam Akers in the long run, and we've been on record saying this, and that you have to worry that the explosion is never going to come back because there's a long list of running backs, a long history of running backs that literally suffer a torn Achilles, never make it back to the NFL, and keep in mind those players were most likely never at the caliber that Cam Akers was anyway. I think the most recent example that we can look at is actually Texas Longhorn Donta Foreman. Donta Foreman tears his ACL after having a breakout week in Houston his rookie year and then really never makes it back. I mean, he scored a touchdown for Tennessee last year, but he was not the same type of running back at all. I mean, this is someone that clearly lost almost all of his athleticism. And on top of this, we understand that with Donta Foreman, I mean, he isn't even on an NFL roster right now. And that's someone that was drafted in the 3rd round of the NFL draft. So we are going to have to be on the lookout for that one. Now, our next trade offer that we sent out was we were sending out Justin Fields. And this one I had to think about for a little bit, to be completely honest, because we got back a quarterback that is significantly worse than Justin Fields in every way possible. We got back Mac Jones. Now, Mac Jones, well, yes, you can make an argument that from an NFL perspective, he can have a very successful NFL career. But the problem is he's very similar to a Baker Mayfield. I'm viewing Mac Jones as a quarterback that, I mean, he really has no access to an elite fantasy ceiling. We know that he's playing on an offense that isn't going to want to all of a sudden turn into a very pass-happy team. I mean, this roster is constructed to kind of play with their defense, play with their offensive line, and run the game through that. But overlooking that entirely and just looking at the fact that Mac Jones has no rushing upside in the slightest is going to play such a large factor here in terms of adjusting your value of Justin Fields and Mac Jones and making sure you're valuing each guy appropriately. Because here in the case of Mac Jones, I mean, I would be surprised if he got 10 rushing yards a game. That's probably not going to happen. And we know what you really want from these fantasy quarterbacks is you want the capability of them going out and rushing for 500 yards in a season, which Justin Fields does have. And if we know that we're playing in a 4-point passing touchdown league, just say Justin Fields rushes for an extra 400 yards and an extra 3 rushing touchdowns compared to Mac Jones. You do the quick math, that's like 58 fantasy points. That's almost 15 passing touchdowns, a difference between Mac Jones and Justin Fields. And it's going to be nearly impossible for Mac Jones to make up that difference. So, of course, that's a significant downgrade. But we are getting Devonta Smith in return. And Smith, like we have previously stated, wide receiver depth is incredibly important in this format. I think Devonta Smith is actually about the perfect wide receiver that you can go through and you can target for a league like this. So having the combination of those players coming in to a young team, both are rookies, we kind of get 2 throws at the dartboard, trying to look for someone that can pop going into year 2. And with the kind of circulating news that Deshaun Watson may be on his way to Philadelphia, I mean, imagine what that would do to Devonta Smith's fantasy value. Okay, so now our last trade that we sent out is going to be a very similar deal. We sent out Justin Fields. And here what we asked for back in return, we asked for Javonte Williams and Laviska Shenault. So this is probably the trade that's least likely to get done. But I mean, I would love to get 2 players that we can play in our flex spots that I believe have high levels of upside. Both Laviska Shenault and Javonte Williams on their rookie contracts. So those are players that should continue to accrue in value. And I have been on record, we've talked about it so much before on why I think that Laviska Shenault is a fantastic dynasty value. Now, on top of this, what you're actually finding with Javonte Williams is I think there's a slight chance that Melvin Gordon ends up getting traded to LA, which would really unlock Javonte Williams in becoming a 3-down running back. That would be fantastic in the case of a Javonte Williams. And just imagine what his dynasty price would be. All of a sudden, I would imagine that Javonte Williams would be a 3rd-round dynasty startup pick. You're also getting Laviska on top of it. because if there was no Melvin Gordon, I mean, I would prefer Javonte over Justin Fields. And if that's how we view it, I mean, I think that taking Laviska Shenault on top is more than a fair deal, at least for us. I would be surprised if it gets accepted, though. Now, thank you, my dudes. I really hope y'all enjoyed this video. Of course, go down there, drop a like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. It helps us out a ton. And if you have any questions, please go to the comment section. And while you're down there, let me know how bad you thought this team was. Let me know if you think there's any chance that any of these trades actually get done, because that's how I like to go through and make trades. I like to go through, send out about 8 at a time in a league, really look at one team at a time. But yeah, let me know what y'all are thinking, and have a great day, my dudes.